Well now, good evening, friends. Andy Taylor here. What if I told you that every midnight for 2 weeks, the sound of angelic singing echoed through Mayberry's empty streets, and nobody could find where it was coming from? What if I told you that mystery had the whole town on edge, with theories ranging from ghosts to angels to things even stranger? And what if I told you that when we finally discovered the truth, it was more heartbreaking and more beautiful than anything we'd imagined? That's the story I want to share with you tonight, about a mystery that taught us all something profound about loneliness, grief, and the healing power of music. It started on a Tuesday night in late September of 1957. I was home getting ready for bed when the phone rang around midnight. "Sheriff Taylor?" came a nervous voice. "This is Ben Patterson. I'm sorry to call so late, but something very strange is happening. I can hear singing, beautiful singing, coming from somewhere outside. It's been going on for about 10 minutes now. I'm looking out my window, but I can't see anyone. It's a bit unnerving, to be honest." I told Ben to sit tight and that I'd come take a look. I got dressed and headed out into the cool autumn night. As soon as I stepped outside, I heard it too. Singing clear as a bell, drifting through the quiet streets. It was a hymn, one I recognized from church. The voice was female, mature, with a trained quality that suggested years of practice. But the strange thing was, I couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. The sound seemed to fill the air from all directions. I walked toward Main Street, following my ears, but the closer I got to where I thought the singing was coming from, the more it seemed to shift and move. After about 20 minutes of searching, the singing simply stopped. The night fell silent again, and I was left standing in the middle of an empty street with no answers. The next night, it happened again. Same time, midnight exactly. Same beautiful singing. This time I got 3 phone calls. Mrs. Hendricks heard it. The Simmons family heard it. Floyd called from his apartment above the barber shop, saying the singing had woken him up and he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. The following night, more calls. By the 4th night, half the town was aware of the mysterious midnight singing. Theories started flowing. Some folks thought it might be someone playing a radio very loudly with their windows open. Others suggested it could be the wind creating strange sounds through the church bell tower. A few of the more imaginative residents whispered about ghosts or spirits. Opie was fascinated by the whole thing. "Pa," he said one morning at breakfast, "do you think it could be an angel? Maybe there's an angel in Mayberry singing at night." I smiled at him. "I don't think it's an angel, son. I think there's a logical explanation. We just haven't found it yet." But secretly, I had to admit the whole situation was peculiar. The singing always started at exactly midnight, lasted for 15 to 20 minutes, then stopped abruptly. It was always hymns, always the same beautiful female voice, always seemingly coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. By the end of the first week, it had become the main topic of conversation in town. People were staying up to listen for it, gathering in small groups on their porches at midnight to experience the phenomenon together. I decided to approach this more systematically. On the 8th night, I positioned myself at different locations around town at midnight, trying to triangulate where the sound was strongest. I started on the north end of Main Street. The singing began right on schedule, and from that position, it seemed to be coming from the direction of the church. I moved quickly toward the church, but as I got closer, the sound seemed to come from behind me. It was as if the source was always just out of reach, always in the direction I wasn't looking. The church itself was dark and locked. I checked all around the building, but found nothing. By the time I'd circled back to Main Street, the singing had stopped for the night. That the next morning, I talked with Reverend Martin at the church. "Have you heard the singing?" I asked him. He nodded gravely. "Everyone's heard it, Sheriff. Some of my parishioners are quite unsettled. They're asking me if it's a sign of some kind, if it means something spiritual. I've tried to reassure them, but I confess I'm as puzzled as anyone. The hymns being sung are ones we use in our services, traditional pieces that many people in town would know. But I can't imagine who would be out singing them at midnight or why." I asked if I could check inside the church, thinking maybe someone had found a way in. The Reverend opened it up for me, and we searched together. Nothing. The building was empty, undisturbed, exactly as it should be. That evening, I decided to stake out the church with Opie. He'd been so curious about the whole thing, and I figured having a second pair of eyes and ears couldn't hurt. We positioned ourselves in the church cemetery around 11:30, hidden behind a large oak tree where we'd have a good view of the building and the surrounding area. "It's spooky out here, Pa," Opie whispered as we waited in the darkness. I put my hand on his shoulder. "There's nothing to be afraid of, son. We're just trying to solve a mystery." Midnight came, and like clockwork, the singing started. From where we were positioned, it sounded like it was coming from the far side of the church, near the old parish hall. We moved quietly in that direction, but again, as we approached, the sound seemed to shift. Then Opie tugged on my sleeve and pointed. "Pa, look," he whispered. "There, by the fence." I looked where he was pointing and saw a figure, dark against the night sky, standing at the far edge of the church property near the iron fence that separated it from the residential street beyond. The singing was coming from that direction. We moved closer, carefully, quietly. As we got near, I could make out more details. It was a woman, elderly, standing alone in the darkness, singing. Her voice rose and fell with the melody of the hymn, pure and clear and heartbreaking in its beauty. She didn't notice us approaching. She was completely absorbed in her singing, her eyes closed, her face tilted slightly upward. I recognized her. Eleanor Harper, a widow who lived a few blocks from the church. I'd seen her around town, always alone, always quiet. She'd lost her husband about 5 years back, if I remembered correctly. I gestured for Opie to stay back, and I approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Mrs. Harper?" I said gently when I was close enough. She stopped singing immediately, her eyes flying open. She looked at me with an expression of shock and embarrassment. "Sheriff Taylor," she said, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb anyone. I should go." She started to turn away, but I held up my hand. "Please don't go," I said. "I'm not here to cause you any trouble. I just want to understand. The whole town has been hearing your singing for the past week and a half. It's beautiful, truly beautiful. But folks are worried and confused. Can you tell me why you're out here singing at midnight?" Mrs. Harper's face crumpled, and I could see she was fighting back tears. "I'm so sorry," she repeated. "I didn't think anyone could tell where it was coming from. I chose this spot because it's away from houses, and I thought the sound would just drift away into nothing. I never wanted to frighten people. But why?" I asked gently. "Why sing out here in the middle of the night?" Why not sing at home or in church? She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Because I can't do either of those things anymore, Sheriff. My husband Harold and we sang in the church choir together for 30 years. It was our joy, our shared passion. When he passed 5 years ago, I tried to keep going to choir practice, but it was too painful. Every song reminded me of him, of his voice beside mine, of the way we'd harmonize. I couldn't bear it, so I stopped going. But I miss it terribly. I miss singing. I miss the music. I miss feeling close to Harold. So you come out here at night? I asked. She nodded. About 2 weeks ago, I couldn't sleep. I was feeling so lonely, so disconnected from everything that used to bring me joy. I went for a walk and ended up here by the church. I started singing, just to myself, one of the old hymns Harold and I used to sing. And for those few minutes, I felt close to him again. I felt like myself again. So I've been coming back every night, always at the same time, to sing. It's become the only thing I look forward to, the only time I feel whole. I had no idea people could hear me well enough to be concerned. I'm truly sorry. I looked at this woman, standing alone in the darkness, seeking comfort in the only way she knew how, and I felt my heart go out to her. Mrs. Harper, I said, you have nothing to apologize for. Your singing is beautiful. But can I ask, why at midnight? Why not during the day? She gave a sad smile. Because during the day, I'd feel foolish. An old woman singing alone in a churchyard. People would think I'd lost my mind. But at night, in the darkness, I can pretend I'm anywhere. I can pretend Harold is still here, singing beside me. I can pretend I still belong somewhere. The loneliness in her words was palpable. I understood then that this wasn't just about singing. It was about grief that hadn't healed, about isolation that had grown over 5 years, about a woman who'd lost not just her husband, but her entire sense of community and purpose. Opie, who'd been listening quietly from a few feet away, spoke up. Mrs. Harper, your voice is really pretty. I heard it from our house, and it made me feel peaceful, not scared. Mrs. Harper smiled at him through her tears. Thank you, young man. That's very kind of you to say. Over the next few days, I thought a lot about Eleanor Harper and her midnight singing. I talked with Aunt Bee about it, and she was heartbroken by the story. That poor woman, Aunt Bee said. 5 years she's been alone, too sad to go back to choir. We should have reached out to her, should have made sure she knew she was still part of the community. I also spoke with Reverend Martin, told him what I'd discovered. He was troubled by the news. I had no idea Eleanor was struggling so much, he said. She stopped coming to choir practice, and I assumed she'd simply lost interest. I should have followed up, should have checked on her. We need to do something, Sheriff. We need to help her find her way back. I had an idea, but I wanted to approach it carefully. I went to visit Eleanor at her home a few days later. She invited me in nervously, clearly worried that I was there in some official capacity to tell her to stop her midnight singing. Mrs. Harper, I said as we sat in her modest living room, I've been thinking about what you told me, about how much you miss singing, how much you miss the choir. She nodded, looking down at her hands. It's the thing I miss most, besides Harold himself. Music was such a big part of our lives. Without it, everything feels empty. I leaned forward. What if there was a way for you to sing again, to be part of the choir again, without it being too painful? What if the choir came to you first, as a way of easing back into it? She looked up, confused. What do you mean? I explained my idea. What if we arranged a small gathering, maybe at the church parish hall? Just you and a few members of the choir. Not a formal practice, just an informal sing-along. You could ease back into it, see how it feels, with people who care about you and want to support you. She looked uncertain. I don't know, Sheriff. After 5 years, I'm not sure I can face them. I'm not sure I belong anymore. You belong, I said firmly. Music doesn't stop belonging to you just because you've been away from it. And I think you'll find that the choir has missed you just as much as you've missed them, Dot. It took some convincing, but eventually, Eleanor agreed to try. I worked with Reverend Martin and the choir director, Mrs. Sarah Caldwell, to arrange a small gathering. We invited just 5 members of the choir, people who'd been close to Eleanor and Harold back in the day. We told them the story, explained how much Eleanor was struggling, and asked them to come with open hearts and no pressure. The gathering was set for a Sunday afternoon, casual and low-key. When Eleanor arrived at the parish hall, I could see she was nervous. Her hands were shaking as she walked in. But the moment the choir members saw her, they rushed to greet her with hugs and warm words. Eleanor, we've missed you so much. It's so good to see you. Your voice has been absent from our choir for too long. Sarah Caldwell, a kind woman in her 50s, took Eleanor's hands. We're not here to pressure you into anything, she said gently. We're just here to sing together, like old times. No expectations, no obligations, just music and friendship. They started with a simple hymn, one that Eleanor and Harold had particularly loved. At first, Eleanor just listened, her eyes filling with tears as the familiar melody washed over her. Then, tentatively, she began to sing along. Her voice, rusty from limited use, but still beautiful, joined with the others. As the hymn progressed, her voice grew stronger, more confident. The other singers smiled and nodded encouragingly. By the second verse, Eleanor was singing with full voice, and the sound was glorious. They sang for about an hour, moving through various hymns and spirituals. With each song, Eleanor seemed to shed some of the weight she'd been carrying. Her face, which had been tight with grief and loneliness, began to soften and glow. At one point, during a song that she and Harold had often sung as a duet, she faltered and stopped. I'm sorry, she said, wiping her eyes. This one is hard. It was Harold's favorite. Sarah put an arm around her shoulders. Then let's sing it for Harold, she said. Let's sing it in his honor and in your honor, for the love you shared and the music you made together. They sang it, all of them, and Eleanor made it through, crying but also smiling. After the singing ended, Eleanor sat with the group, talking and laughing in a way she apparently hadn't done in years. Thank you, she said to all of them. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I'd given up on myself. I didn't realize how much I needed this, how much I'd isolated myself. The music, it's like coming home. Sarah spoke up. Eleanor, we'd love for you to come back to regular choir practice. But only when and if you're ready. There's no rush. You take your time, and when you feel like you can, we'll be there waiting for you. Eleanor thought for a moment, then said something that surprised everyone. I think I'm ready now. I think I've been ready for a while. I just didn't know how to take the first step. You've given me that step. I'd like to come back if you'll have me the following week. Eleanor Harper returned to the church choir for the first time in 5 years. Word had spread through the congregation about her return. And that Sunday, the choir loft was full of people who'd come specifically to welcome her back and hear her sing. When the choir processed in and took their places, Eleanor among them, there was a ripple of quiet applause from the congregation. During the service, the choir sang with particular beauty and power, and Eleanor's voice, blending with the others, added a richness and depth that had been missing. After the service, person after person came up to Eleanor to welcome her back, to tell her how much they'd missed her, to express their joy at her return. Over the following months, Eleanor became not just a member of the choir again, but an integral part of the church community. She started attending social events, volunteering for various activities, building friendships. The isolation and loneliness that had characterized her life for 5 years began to lift. She told me later that returning to the choir had saved her, had given her a reason to get up in the morning and a sense of belonging that she'd thought was lost forever. And the midnight singing stopped, of course. She no longer needed to seek solace alone in the darkness. She'd found her place in the light, among people who cared for her. Opie, who'd been so involved in the mystery from the beginning, learned an important lesson from the whole experience. "Pa," he said one evening, "I was thinking about Mrs. Harper. She was so sad and lonely, but she was right here in town the whole time. Why didn't anyone know she needed help?" "It's a good question, son," I said. "Sometimes people hide their pain really well. Sometimes they don't know how to ask for help, or they think they're supposed to handle everything on their own. That's why it's important to pay attention to the people around us, to check in on folks who seem isolated or withdrawn. Mrs. Harper didn't need someone to fix her problems. She just needed to know that she still belonged, that she still mattered." The story of the Midnight Choir mystery became a teaching moment for the whole community. It reminded us that loneliness can exist right in our midst, even in a small town where everyone supposedly knows everyone else. It taught us that grief doesn't follow a timeline, that 5 years can feel like 5 days when you're dealing with the loss of a life partner. And it showed us the power of music, of shared activity, of community to heal wounds that time alone cannot mend. Eleanor Harper went from being a lonely widow singing in the dark to being a vibrant member of the church and community. And all it took was people reaching out, showing they cared, and inviting her back in. Years later, Eleanor told me that those 2 weeks of midnight singing had been both the loneliest and most important time of her life. Lonely because they represented the depths of her isolation, but important because they forced a crisis that led to healing. "If you hadn't found me that night," she said, "I might have kept going like that indefinitely, cut off from everyone, living half a life. But being discovered, being seen in my pain and loneliness, that opened the door to coming back. Sometimes we need someone to find us when we're lost, even if we don't realize we're lost." The mystery that had frightened and puzzled the town turned out to be a gift in disguise, a pathway to restoration for someone who desperately needed it. Well, now, that's the story of the Midnight Choir mystery, of mysterious singing that led us to discover a lonely soul in need of community, and of how music and human connection brought healing to a grieving heart. It's a reminder that when we encounter mysteries or strange happenings, there are real human stories behind them. It's a reminder to check on the quiet people, the ones who've withdrawn, the ones who are suffering in silence. And it's a reminder that it's never too late to come back, to reconnect, to find your place again in the community you thought you'd lost. I hope this story encouraged you to reach out to someone who might be lonely, to invite someone back who's been away, to pay attention to the people around you who might be singing alone in the darkness, waiting for someone to find them and bring them home. Come back and visit again real soon, friends. Until then, this is Andy Taylor saying good night from Mayberry. Remember, the most beautiful music is made when we sing together, and nobody should have to carry their grief alone. Take care now, and may you always find your way back to the chorus of community when life tries to silence your song.